Honorable Michael R. Pompeo, Secretary of State of the United States of America, members of the official entourage, Ambassador Carlos Trujillo, Permanent Representative of the United States, distinguished permanent and alternate representatives, Secretary General Luis Almagro, Assistant Secretary General Nestor Mendez, distinguished permanent observers, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor as Permanent Representative of Guyana and Chair of the Permanent Council of the Organization of American States to welcome the Secretary of State of the United States of America, the Honorable Michael R. Pompeo, to the House of the Americas, the main forum for political dialogue in our hemisphere. Mr. Secretary, the Permanent Council of the OAS is honored by your presence today. We welcome you to this hemispheric organization where our governments pursue the shared aims of strengthening democracy, promoting and protecting human rights, and advancing integral development and multidimensional security. In keeping with the order of business of this protocol meeting, I am now pleased to invite the Secretary General of the Organization of American States, Luis Almagro Lemes, to deliver remarks. Mr. Secretary General, you have the floor.
Mr. Secretary of State, we are grateful for your leadership in the Americas, for the importance you have given to the inter-American affairs. You show a real and genuine interest in our hemisphere. Mr. Secretary of State, welcome again to the OAS, to this remarkable Hall of the Americas. We are practically neighbors. We work a few blocks away from each other. You're welcome anytime. This is your house, and we are honored to have you here today. The Western Hemisphere has only until recently reversed a trend that dictated the way inter-American affairs were conducted, from one dominated by misunderstanding and ideological rift to one led by principles that have generated an improved level of mutual understanding. The struggle we face today is between democracy and despotism, between those who defend and protect democracy and human rights, such as the United States, those who simply care about these principles and take political positions against dictators and authoritarians. This is the decisive factor shaping the current geopolitical map in inter-American affairs. The United States has always been present in Western Hemisphere politics and diplomacy, functioning as a pillar for regional stability and peace. Yet, in the last 3 years, the United States has increased its role substantially in the region, becoming a central player in its democratic and human rights agenda. Latin America and the Caribbean are no longer out of sight for the United States. It is one of the priorities as its involvement in the fight to democratize Venezuela and end the longest surviving dictatorship in Cuba. I am proud to say that today inter-American affairs are conducted considerably different than in the past. We have a common vision and mutual understanding for action built on the foundational principles of the U.S. of democracy and human rights. We have worked more for development than anyone before. As the premier political hemispheric forum, and after 130 years of existence, we are certainly walking the talk today. The United States is an essential and loyal partner for us in furthering this common vision and agenda of principles of freedom and human dignity in the Western Hemisphere. Like us, the United States understands the importance of achieving a hemisphere free of dictatorships, once and for all, of achieving a hemisphere in which we work for more rights, no fewer rights, for more and more people. The dictatorships always polarize. The path we have ahead is not simple. It will take time, courage, and firm commitment to our work. Those enemies of democracy have endured as long as they have endured, precisely by instilling fear to its people at home and abroad, but by also intimidating the international community to the point of transforming them. The OAS and the United States are denouncing the evidence of gross human rights abuses, the crimes against humanity, and the modern-day slavery practices of the medical missions. The United States, like the General Secretariat of the OAS, visibilizes the crimes and human rights abuses of any regime, the treatment of political prisoners and torture. We should eradicate violence from the continent. We should eradicate torture. We should eradicate extrajudicial executions. We should eradicate crimes against humanity. We should know the facts, not succumb to false narratives and revolutionary rhetoric that belongs to the last century. A dictator is a dictator. And leaders like you, Mr. Secretary of State, have always called out things by their names and have not turned away from injustice. Defending democracy and human rights at home means defending democracy and human rights abroad. It is inconsistent and morally wrong to be once at home and another abroad. The sanctions that we have enacted against corrupt and criminal officials and against individuals with explicit ties to drug trafficking and terrorism have been key to exert pressure on the dictatorship. This is a good time for the OES, an OES that has regained its purpose and is fulfilling its mission thanks to the commitment of member states such as the United States, who are loyal to the non-negotiable cause of democracy and human rights in the Western Hemisphere. In this new era of the OES, in which the trend is a majority united in favor of principles, democracy and human rights, the United States is a vital partner. I'm convinced that together we are implementing inter-American law. We are setting the example for future generations of this hemisphere. That the OES is a world pioneer of multilateralism institutions that delivers, that focuses on the problems of the people, and that strives to be part of the solution and never part of the problem. Principles first. This is the path of our partnership going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. Mr. Secretary of State of the United States of America, you come to the Organization of American States as the representative of a country that is admired for its commitment to democracy, human rights, security, and development, values that are shared entirely by the member states of the OAS. Dialogue and multilateral diplomacy are the methods that the OAS uses to address issues of common interest within the framework of international law and the rules that govern the organization. And it is from that perspective that the Permanent Council addresses the most pressing issues of our hemisphere. The OAS Charter, the Inter-American Democratic Charter, the Social Charter of the Americas are all some of the instruments that allow the organization to stand up to the challenges posed to democracy, security, and prosperity in the region. Your presence before our Permanent Council is very meaningful as a renewed demonstration of your country's commitment to the OAS, its principles, values, mission, and the role it is called upon to play in the consolidation of democracy, peace, and prosperity in our countries. It is a commitment we all share. Not least my own country, Guyana, which, as we are about to celebrate our 50th anniversary as a republic, continues to play its role as a responsible member of the hemispheric family of nations. Here in the OAS, Mr. Secretary, the diverse peoples and cultures of North America, Latin America, and the Caribbean are all represented. We may not always agree with one another, but we sit together in this, the premier political forum of the Americas, to advance our common goals and resolve our differences in the best traditions of multilateral diplomacy. In this respect, the support of the United States will continue to be instrumental in advancing integration and cooperation in the Americas, and it is indispensable in promoting dialogue for the betterment and progress of all the member states of the Organization of American States. Mr. Secretary, we thank you for your visit to the House of the Americas. Está usted en su casa. It is now my great honor to recognize the Secretary of State of the United States of America, the Honorable Michael R. Pompeo.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I want to thank the Permanent Council Chair from Guyana for honoring the United States' request to speak today. And I'd also like to recognize the OAS Superb Secretary General, Luis Almagro, for your excellent leadership and support of democratic values. I want to extend my regards to Assistant Secretary General Nestor Mendez as well. Good to see you this morning. And I further want to thank our ambassador, Carlos Trujillo, for all the good work that you've done here, leading the American mission to OAS with great vision and with great energy and vigor. Thank you for that. I'm reminded, as I stand in front of this beautiful array of people and in this gorgeous place, I'm reminded that it was an American Secretary of State, a man named James Blaine, who first advocated for closer union of the American states in the late 19th century. It was his vision that would become this institution, the OAS, in 1948. It's been an incredible privilege as America's 70th Secretary of State to carry on my predecessor's legacy. Almost exactly 1 year ago, I spoke inside this same magnificent building. It was a dreary, rainy day, but this place sits in view of some of America's greatest monuments to liberty. They were all bright with the glow of freedom, even in the gloomy day around them. The United States had, the day before, recognized Juan Guaidó as the interim president of Venezuela. 13 other OAS nations had done the same. I was proud to urge every one of your countries to join us in that. Throughout this past year, the OAS has been a vanguard for helping the Venezuelan people. They who are so downtrodden and starving because of Maduro's cruelty. In only 3 months, very fast by diplomatic standards, we set a new representative from Venezuela to the OAS, Ambassador Tarek. We've helped bolster Juan Guaidó's legitimacy in the international community despite Maduro's best efforts to undermine him. We revived the Rio Treaty, which led to increased travel restriction on Maduro and dozens of other officials. And you all should know that more actions will be coming. Maduro certainly knows that we mean business. It's why he sought to withdraw Venezuela from this institution, the OAS. We welcomed Venezuela's new representative before he got the chance to do so. We mean what we say in that charter that the previous speakers referred to. The OAS charter says as follows, quote, representative democracy is an indispensable condition for the stability, peace, and development of the region, end of quote. This is multilateralism, nations coming together in a way that truly does work. These have been landmark actions, and in taking these actions, we're returning to the spirit the OAS showed in the 1950s and 1960s. We sent election monitors to Costa Rica in 1962. 2 years later, we imposed sanctions on Cuba for attempting to overthrow the democratically elected government of Venezuela by force. But sadly, the OAS drifted in the 1970s and 1980s. Military dictatorships in our hemisphere colluded to prevent concerted action to support freedom. Some Latin American countries were still in the thrall to leftist ideas that produced repression for their own kind at home and stagnation in this building. And even in the early part of this century, with the OAS, many nations were more concerned with building consensus with authoritarians than actually solving problems. But the good news is, and I'm so proud of what you all have accomplished, that's all changed. Yes, we enjoyed a resurgence of the democratic values in the 90s, but these days, more than ever, our values drive actions that support a hemisphere of freedom. As I said in Santiago last year in 2019, people of the Americas have brought a new wave of freedom, freedom-minded governments all throughout our hemisphere. Only in Cuba, in Nicaragua, and Venezuela do we face stains of tyranny on a great canvas of freedom in our hemisphere. Look at the work that we have all done together. We've rejected despotism this year, besides what we've done in Venezuela. In Nicaragua, the Permanent Council named a commission of member states that has investigated the Ortega regime's killing of hundreds and made clear recommendations for the future of that country. More recently, the OAS honored the former Bolivian government's request to conduct an audit of the disputed election results. The probe conducted uncovered proof of massive and systemic fraud. It helped end the violence that had broken out over the election dispute. It helped the Bolivian Congress unanimously establish a date and conditions for a new election. And it honored, importantly, It honored the Bolivian people's courageous demand for a free and fair election and for democracy. These actions didn't happen within the OAS by accident. It took hard work. They happened because the member states, you all, decided to use the organization to get results, all of us, together. They happened because we have a leader for our times as well. Secretary Almagro is fearless in guarding against authoritarian regimes. He believes in multilateralism that holds people accountable, that puts new ideas on the table, and forces countries to take a position. He restored the OAS financial health too, building the reserve fund and strengthening internal financial controls. This is crucial to making the OAS effective in promoting prosperity throughout the region. Just a handful of years ago, the U.S. Congress, not far from where we all are right now, the U.S. Congress openly entertained slashing funding for the OAS. Now, Congress, America's Congress, is more eager than ever to support what we're doing together because his leadership values capture the bipartisan values of freedom and of democracy. And the good financial management here, too, gives confidence that OAS progress will be effective, cost-effective, and transparent. Secretary Almagro is worthy of our respect and our admiration. The heroes in the Hall of the Americas would be proud of what he's done. He is a true champion for freedom throughout our entire hemisphere. And his example isn't just for those of us in the room. I think other leaders and other organizations, from the UN to ASEAN to NATO, should take note of how this institution has been run by the Secretary General and this body has been crafted, how multilateralism that works has permeated what we all do together. It's energetic, it's effective, it says enterprise work must achieve real results, not just process. Resolutions whose words aren't worth whims, but are truly a basis for joint and collective action. And institutions that take votes that are responsive to the most important issues, not exercises in finding the lowest common denominator amongst us. Now, I know, Secretary General, you have 7 children. So you've had a lot of practice building from chaos and bringing order. But all jokes aside, this is what multilateralism ought to be. This is what happens when it's done well. I spoke about this 13 months ago in Brussels. I critiqued some multilateral organizations. Sleepwalking elements of the international order must wake up. Wishful thinking won't restrain authoritarians in Caracas or in Beijing or in Tehran. The meeting rooms of Washington and Brussels are a front line all their own. Our citizens are trusting us to defend them and to defend their liberties. They deserve multilateralism that works. Some good news. Some good news right here from our own hemisphere. We are already holding the torch. On Sunday, I'll leave on a trip to the region. It's only fitting that my first stop will be in Bogota, the very city where the OAS Charter was forged. Our good friend, our ally, Colombia, along with Brazil, has been a leader in this forum in holding the former Maduro regime accountable. This week, Colombia will build on the good work we did in Buenos Aires last summer and another counterterrorism ministerial. More than 20 nations have said, let's take on the bad guys. I'll then head off to Costa Rica, a great friend whose commitment to democracy has been clear for many decades. And we'll discuss the crisis of authoritarianism right on its own border with Nicaragua. I'll then travel to Jamaica, a good friend of America. My team told me that would be really tough duty. I'll gather at an important meeting with many Caribbean leaders to discuss how we can all work together to promote our common democratic values and prosperity for all of our people. I'm looking forward to a fantastic set of meetings. I want to end here with a thought that recalls the roots of this body's great work throughout time. In 1948, the OAS adopted the American Declaration of the Rights and Duties of Man, the world's first ever international human rights declaration. It was a major influence on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that followed it. The OAS document reads as follows. It says, all men are born free and equal in dignity and in rights. And being endowed by nature with reason and conscience, they should conduct themselves as brothers to one another. It's up to each of you. It's up to each of us to protect dignity and rights. It's up to us to conduct diplomacy as brothers and sisters of the citizens that we each represent. It's up to us to sustain a multilateralism that truly works. May God bless you all. May God bless the work that is done here in this magnificent place. And may God bless all of the Americas. Thank you for being with me this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Distinguished representatives, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, in adjourning this protocol meeting, I would like to thank you all for your attendance and request that you remain in place while the Secretary of State comes to greet you.